Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile video, and today I was persuaded to start playing with the new Dark Monarch helmet and trying out Spectres. There's some new Spectres out there as well, but after looking into them and seeing them in action a little bit, big shout out to Dominated on YouTube, by the way, for showcasing them. We are now going to say that Wretch Defilers, Lightning-based Spectres, which is how my build guide is actually done already, is still better, and therefore that's what I'll be playing. However, I've been having a lot of fun. We're talking about 12 Spectres. For those of you who don't know how Wretch Defilers work, is that every now and then they summon a large chunk of minions each. So some of the boss fights gets filled with minions. We're talking 500 to 600 minions. It's ridiculous, like genuinely ridiculous. But it's fun. Those extra minions, they actually suck. They just stand in the way, body block the enemies, and yeah, they're just fodder. Anyways, want to talk about the build? It's basically an exact replica of my actual build guide, except for that we're putting Doriani on the Mercenary. So what Mercenary do we use? How's the PoE? All of that jazz. Let's crack into the video. Let's have a look at it. So how do we then set this build up? Essentially, the Mercenary we want to use for this specific build, there's two things. I have a PoE link to descriptions below, but before you check that PoE, I will point out that that PoE is for the finished high-end version, and I'm going to show you how to set the build up before you get to that stage as well. But firstly, Mercenary. I would recommend the Fallen Reverend, and the reason for that is because he's using Absolution, which allows him to hit very large areas, and he also usually comes with Spell Cascade, Faster Casting area with these things, which allows you to run Unnerved Gloves for him, which is very, very nice. Allows him to make enemies take more spell damage. For boots, don't really matter too much. I would probably put some Brittle implicit eventually. And for helmet, I will later put a pair of a rare helmet with an influence modifier that makes nearby enemies take increased elemental damage. For weapon, I will use a Dark Seer with Malediction, but they are all very, 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 very expensive. Then I have a Dawnbreaker with % of lightning damage taken as fire because we have a Doriani's prototype on him to make sure that enemies have the same lightning resistance as he has. Then the next goal is to smack him up with items like this with negative lightning resistance, including Immortal Flesh for even more negative lightning rest. How do you start this Mercenary in lower budget versions than this would be to actually have Immortal Flesh. You can buy yourself, instead of Perkul's Toe, you actually could get a negative lightning rest amulet, which are very cheap in the market because nobody wants them except for maybe this build. And instead of these big expensive rings, which are like a couple of divs each, you could run something like Malachi's Artifice. You could run something like Ventor's Gamble, all of which provides negative lightning rest. So you can get started with this. And I'd say like having negative 40, 50, maybe 60% on the Mercenary isn't more than enough to start with. You don't have to push it down to 200 until you have more currency to spend. So the Perkul's Toe gives you nearby allies damaged with hits is lucky. If you choose to run a negative lightning rest amulet instead, then I would recommend that you could run something in the lines of, if I can scroll up and show you, a perfect, I can't spell, perfect Spirit of Fortune Spectre. And this is about 40-50 chaos. This will provide you with that same effect for you, and therefore don't need Perkul's Toe. But if you're running with the setup that I'm running, then you don't need a Spirit of Fortune and can instead run an Onslaught Spectre, which you don't need to be having perfect. It's enough that you go for a Forest Warrior, and it's enough that you grab the normal one, because he still provides Onslaught for some reason, which he actually shouldn't, but he does, which costs like nothing. And then we have a perfect Guardian Turtle. This one is extremely important for the layers of defense. This provides you with the determination, but also another 5% physical damage reduction, which is extremely valuable for this build. And the build is set up in this way. This will be in the PoE as well. I haven't finished it, so I'm not going to show it too much on stream, but I will show some of it at least. But skills are not done. Essentially, I have a Ray Spectre gem, which, sorry, where the hell did I put it? There it is. Ray Spectre gem right here. And then I have Feeding Frenzy and then Culling Strike. I've also added Minion Life. Don't really need this at all, actually. But Feeding Frenzy is important and Culling Strike is nice since we don't have access to an Animate Guardian. And then what I do is make sure that I click the correct Ray Spectre gem when I'm supposed to raise these. Click the corpse for the ritual itemized corpse to get the turtle and the Forest Warrior, or the Spirit of Fortune, depending on your Spectre or on the Mercenary here. And then I have another Spectre Gem. This is where we put them in a proper pair of gloves. And for this build, we don't need a 6-link. Now, you could run a 6-link till you can afford it. So for lower budget versions, you still need a Doriani, which is going to cost you a couple of divs either way. But the cheaper version would be to literally just use a tablet or whatever 6-link you have access to. But for the proper version, you will go in for what's called spork gloves. But we want that on armor-based gloves to make sure we have as much mitigation as possible for the defenses. So the best version would be Leviathan gauntlets. And that is to give us as much armor as possible. The two main modifiers is faster projectiles and faster casting. Easiest way to do that is basically just craft one of each influence, one shaper glove, one elder glove, and then walk them together. You're done. Pray you get slower proj and you're done. That's the easiest way to do it. They're not going to give you any fantastic numbers because the Spectres have 0% to crit. And the reason I'm not using the Spirit of Fortune and I instead have a Purkle's Toe on my Mercenary and therefore get Onslaught is because of these gloves with crit, because then my Spectres will shock themselves. Otherwise, they can't shock. So you have to have crit on the gloves for them to be able to shock. And otherwise, you have to run that Spirit of Fortune. The crafting for these gloves are very expensive. You have to literally walk over the base itself, then craft them with Essence of Horror. It's extremely expensive. They cost like 67 essences per divine. And then once you hit that, you'll then have to meta craft it. It's a big story, a long story around that. But that's how you set up the gloves. And you want to have faster proj, faster casting, critical strike chance for socketed gems. And if you're lucky, you get socketed spells for crit multi, like a proper spork glove. You can have slower projectile as well. That's perfectly fine, just like faster projectile. It's all good. So those are the 5 mods you can play with. And that's the kind of gloves we're going to be running, which means you don't need a 6-link. So instead of a 6-link, we are running a rare chest piece with +1 number of max specters. You can put some Eldritch currency on this to craft the suffixes to get that 8% physical damage reduction. Any resistances or life is perfectly fine. Do keep in mind that the PoB that's linked to the descriptions below has a very different resistance setup than what I'm running right here. And that's what I'm showing you here on this in the video. That you do want to cap your resistances as well as your chaos resistance, which can be done in a multitude of ways. And I'll show you that. But this is basically the chest piece. You can get some implicits. I have a very low tier of those where you convert physical damage taken into fire because of this current style. Later, you'll have that be converted into cold instead. But right now, that's the play. Belt, Darkness of Throne. Yes, I know mine sucks. I get it. You don't have to tell me in the chat. I don't want to read the comments how bad my belt is, okay? Anyways, any sort of dexterity or attributes that you might need, maybe resistances, can be helped here in the jewel. A taunt jewel is really nice here for minions, and then just straight up damage and whatnot. At least the best damage rings would be to have minion attack cast speed rings. If you get minion damage on them, that's great, but bone rings are fantastic. If you need some extra chaos rest, which I needed before one of my latest upgrades, an amethyst ring is fantastic to use here as well. This is also a great opportunity for you to fix dexterity if needed, which I'm now perfectly fine on, but I didn't have that before my last duel. We will be using a Bitterbind point, and you want to have +1 to number of max specters on this one for this specific build, because this will give you 2 specters. More of that later. You'll use a replica Dragon Fang of Flight with a +3 level of 3 Spectre Gems with a Death Attunement oiled. And a weapon, yes, I know, I don't have great gear. I'm aware. You don't have to tell me how bad my weapon is not having minion attack cast speed. I get it, okay? I'm well aware. I don't want to read any comments about that. +2/1, preferably with minion damage, but most importantly, preferably with attack cast speed, which I don't have, but whatever. Boots. There's a couple of different variations of this, but plus level of Ray Spectre Gems is fantastic here. You don't have to go for +2 because the gem is already at level 29. Like, it's fine. You can go for +1. Most importantly, movement speed. And then if you have anything with resistances or attributes, that's great as well. As you can see, my boots only have 7% lightning rest, but I'm fine on that stat right now. Then we run a Dark Monarch. And yes, I know there's 2 sockets open, and that is because normally this is played with Wraith Lord, which means we don't have an entire falling because you just put jewels in there. But Dark Monarch is better this league, but it might not be next league. We'll see. Because the Mercenary is taking the Doriani's prototype, which allows us to get 1 additional Spectre, which with this helmet, which doubles the number of Ray Spectre, is +2. And that's how we can get 12 maximum Spectres. Well, we also get some Chaos Rest, but we have a bunch of sockets open. That's why I have Minion Life over here. I don't even know what to do with all the sockets. So I haven't really decided what to do there yet. We'll see if I figure something out. But right now, they're just open for whatever. A Portal Gem, a Guard skill. Maybe you want to run Molten Shell. Go for it. Automate the Molten Shell. Doesn't really matter. That's actually a pretty decent idea. Anyways, gem-wise, let's go through that. The setup for the support specters, we talked about that. The main damage specters is going to be Spell Echo, Pierce, and Awaken minion damage. In our trigger weapon, we use Life Tap, very important, together with Desecrate and Bone Offering. And since we don't need the 6-link, we instead make it a 5-link, because we're going to have to use Life Tap on most of our skills, because look at our mana, we basically have none. So instead, we have a separate socket for a Tempest Shield, and then we run Convocation, Frost Blink, faster attacks with a shield charge, and all of that together with Life Tap. This way, we can spam all of our abilities, and it will only cost us a little bit of life, which will be leeching anyways. It doesn't really matter. Sniper's Mark, however, still costs mana, which is enough to be casted, because we're linking that to a level 1 Arcane Surge. Reason for this is that Bitterbind point makes it so we gain Arcane Surge if we crit, but we don't care about that. What it does is that your Raised Spectre will also gain Arcane Surge when you do. So me casting a spell, as you can see, they all get this blue shiny effect. So when I have Arcane Surge, they also get Arcane Surge. And that is 20% increased cast speed and a little bit of mana regen. So we link the Sniper's Mark together with a level 1 Arcane Surge to trigger that effect, which will be even more damage. So basically every now and then you'll just cast that every 7 seconds for the Sniper's Mark to give that extra damage. That's the gem setup, and I'm guessing the last ones will be like automated Molten Shell or something. Skill tree wise, first off, in a the initial lower budget approach to this, I would recommend having like much lower types of meta clusters in this, because these are meta clusters. I have Giga over Captain Resistance, so I don't even need this much. It's kind of crazy. I think that for the higher end version, my PUB is going to show one with all attributes and one like this, but with Chaos Res. And as you can see, I'm over capping Chaos Res a lot, and I still have a Light of Meaning. If I unsocket that, I'm not capped, but I'm not far off. And this is because later on we're going to be using a Glorious Vanity, which the PUB will show. But this is a big upgrade. I don't have to be Chaos Res capped at the moment with this version, but it's nice to have, right? My other cluster is actually really, really good. It's an all attribute cluster, which means I don't need all the dexterity I have right here. But those are the two clusters. I have been farming tier 17s and tier 16s with only one of these clusters, and it was with the bad one, which is not fantastic, but it's still an expensive purchase. So I will say this and point out that this is not needed to get this to work. But if you want to do tier 17s, it's been clear to me that you're going to want one of these to make it comfortable, but you can play it without it. It's just not going to speed farm or run straight through it. Other than that, the skill tree is pretty straightforward. The PUB is going to show you all of these details. And the Watcher's Eye I'm using, ignore the hatred, doesn't do anything, but we want to have physical damage reduction whilst affected by determination. For the initial lower budget version of this style, it's pretty expensive. I don't want to use the word low, I guess, but that's it. And that's genuinely it. The ascendancy nodes, let's talk about them real quick. We have Mistress of Sacrifice that allows us to have the Bone Offering affect us. And then we have minus aggression and bone barrier. This is just damage, and bone barrier gives your minions defenses, but they're going to leech HP to you and get you physical damage mitigation, which means that the leech node down here gives us some portion or 5% of their damage leech to you will be instant, and that's how we're basically staying alive all the time, together with block cap at 77, 78 right now. And that's not even with quality bone offering. So it's pretty crazy, actually. On the other hand, over to the PUB. In the PUB, as you can see here, the resistances is a little bit wonky. However, the reason for this is because I'm going to keep the idea of running Sublime Vision. So I want to mention that and explain how that works. Sublime Vision of this with Purity of Ice makes it so that you can only have a Purity of Ice as an aura. That means we're having a little bit of a different aura setup than what we're running. Is the auras we're running is Purity of Elements. And then we have Generosity with Zealotry. That's what we're running in this setup. And then we have the Tempest Shield I explained earlier. Purity of Elements, Generosity, Zealotry. That's it. However, in the finished version for higher endgame, we're switching so that we're only using Purity of Ice as the only aura. But we are going to run buffs on top of this. And those buffs comes in the form of, like I said, the skills aren't finished right now. I'll be fixing that in a bit. So we are going to run Purity of Ice, Tempest Shield, which is not an aura, it's a buff, and a regular Arctic Armor to get freeze immunity. This way we're shock immune, and we get the block, and we get freeze immune, and some extra defense. Because these are not auras, they're buffs. Together with Purity of Ice, they also means that we don't need these reservation nodes that I'm currently forced to take because of my current aura setup. I'm going to point that out. However, when we run Sublime Vision, not only does that impact us, we also get 30% of fire and lightning damage that we take is taken as cold damage instead. And we're going to combine this with a glorious vanity of Sibaka. This gives us Divine Flesh. Divine Flesh makes us have 5% extra Chaos Rest, but we can then get to 80%. However, 50% of all types of elemental damage is taken as Chaos damage instead. Now we have to cap our Chaos Rest. This is why it's so nice to have a lighter meeting down here to reduce the pressure of that. However, our Watcher's Eye will also change, and this one you need a perfect roll of the 20% of fire and lightning damage will be taken as cold instead, whilst affected by Purity of Ice. What this does is that you are now, when you are hit by either fire or lightning damage, 50% of that is taken as chaos damage, and the other 50% is taken as cold damage, which means you don't need any lightning rest. You don't need any fire rest. You are never going to take any sort of that type of damage. They will either be cold or chaos, or if you take cold damage, 50% of that is also chaos. So that is how the defenses is going to work with this build, which alleviates so much pressure on your suffix modifier, as you only need chaos and cold rest, as well as any attributes you might need, or damage mods, which opens up the possibility for things like damage mods and bone rings and stuff like that, and just generic stats across the board. So that's something I'm going to keep using for this version in the higher end when it's finished. That's the idea, at least. Like I said, I'm going to finish fixing the skills here, as I was trying to decide what to do with the two last sockets, but I think we'll just do an automated molten shell. Like I said before, the Spectres will be using 10 Wretch Defilers and then 1 Forest Warrior and 1 Guardian Turtle, but you can run the Spirit of Fortune if needed. And the skill tree changes is, like I mentioned before, you'll need these 3 reservation nodes so that you can run Purity Elements, Generosity, Zealotry, and that Tempest Shield before you get to the full-fledged endgame version, which will be in the PoE linked in the descriptions below. And like I said before, I played this without this cluster. I only had 1 cluster up here, and you can play tier 17s before that. And before everyone keeps spamming me, which one is better, Mage Skeletons or Spectres? I will say this very clearly. The Mage Skeletons will be doing a little bit more damage for single target, well, actually more damage in general than this build. However, you have to summon your minions all the time, which means that the Spectres have a faster clearing. And I can show you a quick map with this and display that quite easily. And let me see if I can just find a map. Let's just do I have a map around here? Yeah, we have some maps here. Daily tier 17s, reach, eater. I can show you how this looks. Just be wary that your FPS might tank if you're not having a really good computer. Holy balls. Come on, servers. I'm making a recording. Don't do me like this. Don't do me like this when we're recording. It don't matter too much because the build's pretty damn tanky, but basically you're just gonna fly through the maps. Holy Christ, man. Jesus Christ, servers. Come on. Everything was fine earlier. Okay, I'm just gonna ask Hikis to see if he can put some footage before the video started, so you guys can actually see the gameplay of this from the stream or something. Oh god, that's about it. I'll ask to put some footage in, and I hope you guys enjoy this. I've been having a lot of fun. The Spectre build is my favorite build to play in the game, so it's pretty fun to go back to it with this new helmet, the Dark Monarch. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and hit the like button, subscribe for more content. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe, keep rocking, have a great fucking night, everybody.